Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emer Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar on the EU medicines assessment activities and opportunities for expert involvement. I'm delighted to co-chair this webinar with Professor Karl Broich, President of the Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices, BfArM, and a member of the Heads of Medicines Agency's HMA Management Group. The European Medicines Agency and national competent authorities in the member states of the European Economic Area work closely together on the scientific evaluation and supervision of medicines, including safety monitoring, forming, together with the European Commission, the European Medicines Regulatory Network, and we call this the EMRN. Protecting public health is our long-term objective, and it is important that the network continues to be supported by an extensive pool of scientific experts who contribute to various aspects of assessment and other related activities. Today's webinar is intended to raise awareness of the work of the EMRN and to encourage broader expert participation by highlighting the opportunities for further engagement with the network. This complements the already existing mechanisms to involve patient, consumer, and healthcare professionals in EMA's activities. We hope to capture the interest of healthcare and regulatory experts working outside the pharmaceutical industry and who have experience in clinical medicine, pharmacology, toxicology, inspections, and other aspects of medicines research, development, manufacturing, and surveillance, both within the EU and internationally. Before we start, a few housekeeping notes. All participants are muted upon entry as microphones will be disabled during the webinar. You can still submit comments and questions via the chat or by emailing publicengagement@ema.europa.eu. We will review all requests and we will endeavour to address them after the webinar as far as we can. The meeting is being recorded and will be published on EMA's YouTube channel and website afterwards. I now give the floor to my co-chair, Professor Karl Broich, who will introduce our speakers. Over to you, Karl.
Yes, thank you, Emer. And indeed, it is my great pleasure to co-chair this webinar with you on behalf of the heads of national competent authorities and to further encourage expert participation in our network activities. We are joined today by an excellent set of speakers, including first Bruno Cepodis, Chair of EMA's Committee for Human Medicinal Products, CHMP, followed by Anna Cunny, a clinical assessor from the Health Products Regulatory Authority in Ireland, currently seconded as expert to EMA, followed by Tina Holmberg, a GCP inspector from the Finnish Medicines Agency, Fimea, and also seconded to EMA, and then finally Francesca Day, the head of Therapeutic Areas Department at EMA. They will explain to you how the EU regulatory system for medicines functions, including the role of scientific experts in supporting the assessment of medicinal products. That means support in part or more broadly the development, evaluation and supervision of medicines for human use in the EU. So let us then start with no further delay. Bruno, the floor is yours for an introduction to the assessment of medicines in the EU.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Professor Broich, for this kind introduction. It is my pleasure to guide you in the next few minutes on the brief notions or the introductory notes for the assessment of medicines in the European Union. As already mentioned by Eimear, the EMA is the European Union's medical regulator. It's a decentralized agency established in 1995 to evaluate medicines for use both in people and in animals. The offices, as you know, are in Amsterdam, and the mission is encapsulated by the words that I will show you in the next slide. And here, science, medicines, and health these are the words that encapsulate what we do. There is a commitment to science and public health to create a truly European system for assessing medicines, and this commitment was made in 1995, and here we are 30 years later. To serve and protect patients and animals in the EU, leveraging the brightest minds in science from 27 member states to impact the lives of millions of European people. Our commitment is exactly this. We ensure that medicines are safe, effective, and of high quality, no matter where you live in the EU. Next slide. How do we do this? Well, we don't work alone. We are a part of a broader network of coordinated, articulated actions between the European Medicines Agency, the European Commission, and the heads of medicines agencies representing their national competent authorities. While the European Commission is the guardian of the legislation and oversees all aspects of what we do, it does so in full articulation with the scientific and regulatory assessment of both EMA and the national competence authorities. While the EMA is responsible for the centralized procedure, the national competence authorities coordinate the work related to mutual recognition and the decentralized procedure. Next slide. So when we dive briefly into these procedures, once a sponsor or applicant has completed development and has the data to support the quality, the safety, and efficacy of a medicine, it can apply for a marketing authorization, and different routes are there available in the European Union. National procedures where applicants submit the marketing authorization applications to the national competent authority of the member state where they want to place the medicinal product. Mutual recognition procedures where when we have already an existing marketing authorization and marketing authorization holders have a product in that member state and want to have this authorization recognized by other EU countries. This process allows member states to rely on each other's scientific assessments. And then we have also the decentralized procedure, applying where applicants apply for the simultaneous authorization of a medicine in more than one EU member state if it has not yet been authorized in any EU country. And then we have the centralized procedure focused and centered in the EMA. Next slide. And here you have our crown jewel. This is what really makes us stand out. The EMA is the single point of marketing authorizations in the EU via our central authorization procedure. The principle is simple: one application, one assessment, and one marketing authorization valid for everyone in Europe and for everywhere. The network makes this possible, so we operate within a system of reliance and recognition that relies on trust between us all. And I already mentioned this before, in the slide before, when I mentioned trust on the other assessments performed by member states. For industry and developers, the benefit of this single procedure saves time and resources from applying via 27 separate member states. Next slide. The centralized procedure is mandatory for certain types of medicines outlined in this slide, but for medicines that do not fall within these categories, companies have the option of submitting an application for a centralized marketing authorization to the EMA, and this is possible for medicines containing a new active substance that are a significant therapeutic, scientific, or technical innovation, or whose authorization would be in the interests of public or animal health. These, as you can see, the eligibility criteria has been evolving since the inception of the procedure in 1995, and the last addition was in 2008 with the addition of the advanced therapies. But these areas show important therapeutic areas in terms of science, of development of technologies, and therefore, in the interests of the European medicine system, makes sense to have them in the centralized, eligible for the centralized procedure. Next slide. We sit at the center of a network of 50 national competent authorities from 27 member states, consisting of 4,000 scientific experts. Every day, through our work, we serve the needs of 450 million people in Europe. This network that we are a part of unites us of all to create a single market for pharmaceuticals. Members are all different, but together we create value for the EU citizens. How? By working together, we can pool our resources and coordinate our work. We can create consistent standards and bring together all of our scientific experts, and we can communicate faster and share information on important safety issues. Next slide. How do we do it? Well, different committees within the EMA have different responsibilities. Some directly responsible for providing opinions on everything related to marketing authorizations of human medicines, and I would say even anything related to human medicines. That's the CHMP, the CAT, and the PRAC. And other committees are responsible for the incentives associated to the developments in rare diseases, such as the COMP, the Committee of Orphan Medicinal Products, and the implementation of the pediatric development plans, such as the Pediatric Committee. We also have a committee dedicated to herbal medicinal products. The work is heavily supported by the network of experts previously mentioned, translated in the direct contribution of different national competent authorities, and benefiting from the close work developed with other regulatory authorities worldwide, of which the ICH, the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, is just an example. Next slide. The Committee of Medicinal Products for Human Use, the CHMP, has a central role in the system and is supported by a robust structure organized in 4 different domains that the committee oversees together with the EMA. These domains are the quality domain, the non-clinical domain, the methodology domain, and the clinical domain. Each domain has different working parties, operational expert groups convened by convenience, and ESECs, European Specialized Experts communities. So as you can see, there is a plurality of contributions that come together when deciding on the benefit risk of a medicine in the European Union. There are also external contributions from scientific advisory groups and ad hoc expert groups covering different therapeutic areas. And although these groups are not expected to conclude on the benefit risk of a medicine, they bring key elements to the discussion, especially in areas where the network needs additional expertise, mostly related to clinical management of patients and clinical practice, and also the views of patient representatives or additional views of patient representatives. Next slide. But there's more support than just related to the work of the committees on the marketing authorizations or any procedures leading to authorization. EMA and the system provides supports to early stages of medicines development through a number of tools. These include the EMA Innovation Task Force, a soft landing zone, particularly for smaller developers and researchers that proactively identify scientific, legal, and regulatory issues related to emerging therapies and technologies. The Pediatric Investigation Plan, or the PIP, that is agreed early in development between companies and the Pediatric Committee, as mentioned before. The scientific advice, another cornerstone of our support, where the agency advises the developers on the appropriate studies for the development of a medicine. Also, the qualification of innovative development methods, and of course, the classification of advanced therapy medicinal products, the support given to small and medium-sized enterprises via the SME office at the EMA, and also the designation of orphan medicines, therefore developing facilitating the development and the authorization of medicines for rare diseases. And finally, the priority medicine scheme launched by the EMA to enhance the support for the development of medicines that target unmet medical needs. Next slide. The dossier submission is an important part of the start of the work of marketing authorization, and where we certainly look for the engagement of external experts. As you know, this is the file, the dossier is submitted in the electronic common technical dossier format. It's in an electronic format. The module 1 is specific of each regulatory region, but modules 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are intended to be common to all regions. These are applications submitted in English. There are specific time slots, timetables published by the EMA for these submissions. And of course, the EMA conducts an administrative validation. Next slide. But when dealing with any application, rapporteurs are appointed to lead the scientific assessment and evaluation of all parts of the submission, and they represent the CHMP, the CAT, the PRAC, in liaison with the applicant, and present the application to the committees for discussion. Experts of the network benefit during the assessment work of dedicated EMA support, including a product team enriched with different expertise and created important bridges between the assessment teams and the rapporteurs. No one is ever alone in our work. We work together, we face challenges together, and we find solutions together. Next slide. The assessment generally lasts 210 days, with important time points where deliverables are expected, the day 120, the day 180, and the day 210. These milestones generate questions, especially day 120 and day 180, that need to be answered by applicants in periods where clock stops exist to give applicants time to address these issues raised. There may be additional steps, such as inspections or consultations of SAGs or oral explanations, but one thing is certain: applications of good quality, mature and well prepared, supported by excellent clinical evidence and clearly addressing any issues identified may very well be finalized before day 210. Why not day 180? Next slide. Once reached a final opinion, not only the CHMP opinion has several annexes where you can find a summary of the product characteristics, which is the basis for healthcare professionals on how to use the medicine, where you can find information on manufacturers, legal status, any other specific obligations that need to be fulfilled by the marketing or authorization holder, but also as part of this package, you have the full assessment report provided in English. This is then transferred to the European Commission. There will be at the same time a linguistic review, translating all of this information except for the CHMP assessment report in the EU official languages. And then the European Commission prepares a draft decision that is screened also by the Standing Committee of Medicinal Products for Human Use, where you have representatives for all member states that give an opinion on this draft decision, and therefore the European Commission will in the end adopt a decision on granting or refusing a marketing authorization, which takes effect from the date of notification. Next slide. Once a medicine is on the market, EMA is responsible for coordinating the EU safety monitoring or the pharmacovigilance system for medicines, and can take action if information indicates that the benefit-risk balance of a medicine has changed. How do we do it? The safety of medicines authorized in the EU is constantly monitored via reports from patients and healthcare professionals and clinical studies, medical literature, patient registries, and collaboration with the regulatory bodies outside the EU, as shown on the left-hand side of this slide. But also, to digest this information, the EMA has a committee dedicated to the safety of medicines for human use that works hand in hand with the CHMP. And this is the Pharmacovigilance and Risk Assessment Committee, or PRAC. The main responsibility of the PRAC is to assess and monitor safety issues for human medicines. And this includes the detection, assessment, minimization, and communication relating to the risk of adverse reactions while taking the benefit of the medicine into account. It also tells us that the PRAC is responsible for the design and evaluation of post-authorization safety studies and pharmacovigilance audits. When there is an important new safety information on a medicine, this is communicated to the network through our early notification system. Post-authorization, and depending on any emerging data, the marketing authorization may be varied, suspended, or withdrawn based on recommendations from the PRAC and the CHMP. Depending on the outcome, then we have a decision by the European Commission. Next slide. To finalize, I would like to to again reinforce the bigger picture. Trust underpins everything in our world, especially regulatory world of medicines. And it is very hard to earn. Our daily work includes efforts to make sure patients and healthcare professionals have good evidence-based information about medicines, science, and health, and that they know about the risks and benefits of medicines. For all this to work, we need to champion science and public health at every opportunity. We take our role as a primary source of good scientific information in the world very seriously. And as you can see, we are a network dedicated to upholding the highest standards of quality, safety, and efficacy of medicines for patients in the European Union and globally, while enhancing the EU competitiveness and navigating the challenges and opportunities for emerging scientific knowledge, technologies, and methodologies. And with this, I thank you very much for your attention, and I hand the floor back to Carl. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for this excellent overview, and you can see how much has to be done for then safety and efficacious medicinal products for our European citizens. We will continue now with Anna, who will explain what the clinical assessors as part of an evaluation of a medicine entails and what has been her experience as part of such assessment teams. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Carl, and thank you, Bruno. So my presentation is very simple, really, just to give you a flavour for what type of person becomes a clinical assessor and what it is that they do all day. We're just using a clinical assessor as an example of a type of assessor in the European Medicines Regulatory Network, just to give you an idea of what exactly we do. So my background is that I'm a general practitioner, trained in Ireland, and I have a special interest in heroin addiction treatment and care of refugees and care of people experiencing homelessness. But as you can imagine, that's a difficult job to do long term. So after a number of years of doing that, I reconsidered what my long-term career would be. And I had always been very interested in pharmacology and therapeutics. So I applied to join the Irish Medicines Agency, and that's actually almost 15 years ago now. And I would be honest with you, I have never looked back. My job is a little bit easier than my previous clinical job, I have to say. So I have a very diverse workload, but I mostly focus on medicines that are being developed for skin diseases. I still work as part of a team, which I enjoy, very important to somebody who's come from a clinical space. And I still feel that I fulfill my duty of care to patients also, which is very important to me. And currently I'm on secondment or on loan to the European Medicines Agency for the last 2.5 years. And at the agency, I support staff and I train staff and I give clinical advice on immunology products. Other clinical assessors that I've worked with both in Ireland and at an EU level have different backgrounds to myself. Some others are GPs, obviously also, but some others are hospital specialists, like many of you on the line today. Some are clinical pharmacists. Some are also scientists that might have some relevant clinical background. For example, they may have done a lot of research in pharmacology, immunology, oncology, etc. And so the European Medicines Agency has been in existence for 30 years and my own agency in Ireland for almost 60 years. So I am lucky to work and assess medicines in a very long established network, which is also very important to me. Next slide, please. So what do I do all day? There's a variety of work, and some of the work that I do is purely for Ireland, and some of the work that I do is for all of Europe. As Bruno has explained to you, it's a little bit complex how we assess medicines for individual member states as well as for all of the European Union. And the sort of work that I do, I would describe them as being discrete work projects, essentially, each in an individual work project each. So one type of application or work project that I would work on, as an example, is a marketing authorization application. And that is simply just where a pharmaceutical company requests to obtain a license for a medicinal product, either in Ireland or in another EU member state or states. Another type of project or thing that I work on is called a scientific advice application. And that's a request by a pharmaceutical company for advice on their clinical development program. And that's very interesting work because you're very much assessing the cutting edge of science there in terms of development of pharmaceuticals. Another piece of work that I do would be to assess a clinical trial application for Ireland. And that's where a pharmaceutical company or an academic group want to run a clinical trial in Ireland or in another EU member state. And I look at how they're setting up that clinical trial to ensure that it's safe for patients to be enrolled in that trial. So all in all, the work is very varied. I get to work in Ireland, I get to work in Europe. The work is very, very interesting, and I'm constantly staying up to date by reviewing the latest scientific developments in pharmaceutical medicine. So next slide, please. And so working as part of a team makes the job very enjoyable. So just I'll use an example of a new centralized medicine that's has been applied for to be authorized by a company. And so the team for the assessment of that type of application would be quite large. So usually we would have a pharmacokinetics assessor, an efficacy and pharmacodynamics assessor, and that's the work that I usually do. A safety assessor, a biostatistician, a non-clinical assessor, and a quality team. The size of the quality team will depend on the complexity of the product and whether it's a chemical, biological, etc. And the assessment is very multidisciplinary. Because just for example, the PK data can impact the safety or the efficacy assessment. So I would need to talk to the PK assessor about our opinions on the data. The clinical and the non-clinical pharmacodynamic data can impact the efficacy assessment. So again, we work together on that. We always need the help of a biostatistician, especially if there are complex statistical tests used and described in the dossier. The biostatistician would help me to interpret the efficacy data, so we would work very closely together. The non-clinical data presented would obviously impact the safety assessment, and quality issues can obviously impact the efficacy and the safety of a product. So we all work together and have meetings, regular meetings, to discuss the product, to decide on our opinion, our final opinion on the benefit risk of the product. So together we would agree those conclusions on the product, and then together we would also agree a list of questions that we're going to send to the applicant. So it's a multidisciplinary assessment. While you do an individual discrete assessment yourself and you form your own opinions, you're not left on your own to decide on the benefit risk balance for that product. You get to work with a lot of highly qualified, highly specialized people. And when needed, we will get in the opinions of external experts also, if it's a very niche area, very niche indication or niche condition, for example, or a very new type of technology. So the work is very collaborative and very international also. So next slide, please. How do I do it? You know, I mean, if you are currently working in a pharmacy or a hospital, you know, understanding how it is that I would assess clinical data may be a little bit of a mystery, but it's not really. The one benefit is that I get to make a cup of coffee and finish it, something I don't think I ever did when I was working clinically. So what I tend to do is I attach 2 spare screens to my laptop so that I can see all the data very clearly. And I just sit down and I start to read what's presented to me by the applicant. So the applicants send in a dossier of supporting documents. They're sent in digitally, and they're organised into logical folders, and every application looks the same. So once you've done one, you'll understand where all of the information is in another application. So in one folder, the applicant will give you their introduction to the product and the background to the information to the product. Did they get scientific advice from the EMA, for example? Have they been working with the EMA on development of this product in children, for example, so that once you have read that folder, you have a good idea of the background of the product. In another folder, they will put the applicant's summary and opinion of their data to make it easy for you to just get an overall broad picture of the clinical development program without, you know, initially having to read the raw data from the trials. So reading that gives you a good idea of the background of the product also. But then in another folder, the applicant will present all of the non-clinical data, and then in another folder, all of the original clinical data, and you probably want to drill down into that to get a good understanding of the pivotal clinical trial data that is supporting this application. You just open each folder, take your time to digest the content, go off, have another cup of coffee, think about it, form your opinions on that content. And then what you have to do is summarize your opinions on those data and write them down in a standardized assessment template or an assessment report, which is the same for every procedure. And these assessment templates that we have are very helpful. They're a little bit like painting by numbers. They give you guidance in them about what goes where, what you are required to comment on. And in the next slide, please, I'll show you what that looks like. So these are just screen grabs of an assessment template for a centralized medicine. And as you can see there are different sections. The blue text there is a prompt for the companies to populate the assessment report with basic data about the medicine so that you don't have to go copying and pasting in tables and graphs, etc. And then those grey boxes there are where you put your opinion of the data presented by the applicant. And the green text tells you literally word by word what it is that you should be commenting on so that you don't forget anything, and so that every assessment report is standardized, looks the same, and so that they're complete, so that the CHMP of the EMA has the information that they need to form an opinion and vote on that product. So it's very straightforward entirely. And so next slide, please. The sort of output that is expected from me as a clinical assessor is, one of the things I have to do is I would have to usually meet with an applicant before they submit their dossier to hear a little bit about the product, the indication, etc., answer any questions that they might have about the submission process, and for me to be able to ask them questions or prompt them on perhaps something that I might think might be missing from the data or from the dossier, or something that I'd like them to focus on a little bit more in their submission to explain better to me. Then, as I described, I assess the dossier and produce an assessment report to the deadlines that Bruno has outlined for you. I liaise with other EU member states to agree this list of questions that we would send to the applicant. And then sometimes I have to dial into the CHMP plenary meeting of the EMA when the product is being discussed, just in case somebody has a question for me as a very specific assessor, because I will obviously be very familiar with the specific data for that product. The questions go out to the company and then they send back responses to us. And then it's my responsibility to review those responses and amend my opinion perhaps on the product or on the benefit risk balance of that product based on what the company has sent in. And then I update the assessment report accordingly and give my final opinion on that product to be voted upon by the CHMP. So next slide, please. So if you're working as a pharmacist or a doctor at the moment, you might feel that you wouldn't have an idea of what sort of questions it is that you would have to ask a company based on reviewing these data, but really you would. Anybody that has a scientific and a little bit of a clinical background and a lot of common sense will be able to formulate very sensible questions on these dossiers. You just use your common sense and a little bit of detective work at times, and the same principles apply across all applications. So typical questions that we would ask would be, did the company study the appropriate category of patients? So, for example, if they're seeking an indication in a pediatric population, we would want them to have looked at this medicine in pediatric patients, obviously. Does the claimed mechanism of action that they're proposing, does it even make sense to you? Did the company follow up their subjects for long enough? So, for example, if they're developing a medicine in rheumatoid arthritis and they only have data for up to 24 weeks, well, we wouldn't consider that acceptable. We would have to ask them, do they plan to gather more data for a longer term, because these patients will be on this medicine for a much longer term than 24 weeks. Did the applicant compare their product to the standard of care? And if they didn't, why not? You would have to ask them why they didn't do that. Did you notice when you were reviewing the data that a lot of subjects dropped out of the pivotal study? Why do you think that is? Did the applicant explain that to you? If they didn't, then you would obviously ask them a question on that to clarify better for you. Did they present data for all of the key endpoints? And if they didn't, why didn't they? And then you would obviously raise a question if they didn't. Did a large number of subjects have very severe or very serious side effects during the pivotal studies? that might raise a red flag to you. And if the applicant hasn't addressed that in their dossier, you're going to ask them a question about that to further clarify that. Did the company study vulnerable populations, such as the elderly or people who have renal failure? If they didn't, do they plan to? You might have to ask them a little bit more about that. And overall, does the claimed benefit of this product that they're proposing, does it outweigh the risks? And if you feel at the end of your assessment that it doesn't, is there something that the company could do? And you might ask them about that. Have they further studies planned, for example? So those are the sort of questions. Very simple, very straightforward. Anybody with a logical or scientific brain will be able to formulate any of these questions after reading a dossier. So next slide, please. And is the work satisfying? Well, I've been doing it for almost 15 years now. So if it wasn't, I guess I wouldn't consider that it is satisfying. I feel that I'm reviewing data that's very much at the cutting edge of pharmaceutical science. I get to work on the whole life cycle of a medicine. In particular, I get to do that because I focus very much in the area of dermatology. So I would often give scientific advice to companies, and then I would see the clinical trial application come in and review that. And then I would see the data that has been generated from those clinical trials and review it then at the stage of request for marketing authorization. I get to do an independent assessment and formulate my own thoughts on a product. I have time to reflect on the data, which is a luxury that I probably never would have had in clinical practice. You don't have time to ever really think about things in clinical practice. And based on receiving new data from the company, I can update my opinion. I get to engage with a lot of teamwork, both internally in Ireland, at a UU level, and then also I can get to collaborate with experts in a particular disease area as needed. There's such an array of products with varying variety and complexity. And if you were to, describe this, I would say that there's enough work to suit every taste, really, and there's so much work to do in the field. I get to bring my experience from the clinical setting, which is really nice, to the assessment team, because maybe not everybody on the team has a clinical background. So that's really nice to still stay fresh on my clinical experience and bring that to the assessment. And very importantly for me, I still maintain my full professional certification as a general practitioner in Ireland. So if I wish to, I could go back to that work at any time. And I'm reassured by working in this area that I am very much staying up to date with the work that I do. So that is essentially who becomes a clinical assessor in the network and the sort of work that they do every day. So I hope that's been clear for you. Back to you.
Thank you, and I hope you can hear me. So thank you for explaining which and how questions will be addressed in the clinical assessment part and its many aspects, in particular your personal view on this and your personal experience. Our next speaker, moving on, Tina, she will now address different aspects as she will walk us through the inspection process and how the network ensures the compliance with applicable requirements, quality controls, and so on. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Carl, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Tina Holmberg. I'm from the Finnish Medicines Agency and currently working at the EMA Inspections Office as a seconded national expert. I will talk to you about inspection process, which is in addition to the clinical assessment, an essential part of the authorization of medicinal products in the EU. On this first slide is shortly my background. By education, I'm a pharmacist, and I've joined the Finnish Medicines Agency almost exactly 21 years ago. I've been involved in various medicines regulatory activities, and I have been a GCP inspector since 2007, which is the reason why I'm talking to you today. A GCP inspector inspects clinical trials. There is no one typical background for a GCP inspector. Most of us are pharmacists, some are medical doctors, but different educational and professional backgrounds are useful in the inspector network because GCP inspections cover a wide variety of activities. We also collaborate closely with clinical assessors and the other experts that Anna mentioned in her talk. Next slide, please. At the different stages of a life cycle of a medicinal product, the organizations performing research and the pharmaceutical companies keeping the medicinal products on the market have to comply with different quality standards. The purpose of the quality standard is to ensure that the medicines are safe and effective, and that the benefit-risk evaluation that is performed at the time of granting the marketing authorization, as well as any post-marketing regulatory decisions, are based on reliable data. The quality standards are commonly referred to as GXP. Non-clinical studies should follow good laboratory practice. In clinical trials on humans, good clinical practice applies. Manufacturing of medicinal products follows good manufacturing practice. Good pharmacovigilance practice applies to the activities of the marketing authorization holder to monitor the safety of the medicinal product on the market. Inspection processes in the different GXP areas have a lot in common, but on the other hand, the activities within the different X's are quite different. I will focus in this presentation on the clinical trials and the GCP inspection process. Firstly, what is good clinical practice? It is an international, ethical, scientific, and quality standard for clinical trials. The purpose of the standard is to ensure the protection of rights, safety, and well-being of trial participants, and the reliability of data produced in the trial. It should be read together with the ICH guideline on general considerations for clinical trials. The GCP guideline applies to clinical trial conduct, from the planning of the trial to the reporting and everything in between. And it is the main reference used in GCP inspections. There's a new version of the ICH GCP guideline coming into effect on July 23rd. And if I had to pick one sentence from the guideline to summarize the message, it would be the last quoted on this slide. Trials are different, and one-size processes and tools don't fit all. So focus should be on the critical to quality factors. What is really relevant to protect the trial participants and to ensure good quality data. On the next slide, GCP inspections are performed by qualified inspectors of the national competent authorities of the EU member states for the purposes of supervision of ongoing trials or the verification of the reliability and ethical conduct of trials used in marketing authorization applications. Routine inspections are conducted for the routine surveillance of GCP compliance. Member states have their risk-based inspection programs for this. And for marketing authorization applications, there are predefined criteria used to select the applications inspected. For-cause inspections are requested when an assessor finds something concerning in the application. Triggers could be, for example, unexplained protocol deviations, or changes to the trial design and data analysis, or discrepant data in the clinical study report. The scope of a routine inspection is general, whereas these triggered inspections focus on the specific concerns and addressing the questions from the assessors. Routine inspections are requested at the beginning of the marketing authorization application process and completed in the timelines of the assessment. So the routine inspection program does not cause delays to the processing of the marketing authorization applications. Next slide, please. The EMA coordinates those GCP inspections that are conducted in the context of the centralized marketing authorization applications. The national competent authorities responsible for the assessment of the application are asked to carry out the inspections. An inspection team comprises of inspectors from 2 different member states. This is a way for us to promote the harmonization of the inspections and to ensure quality as the inspections are performed on behalf of the whole EU. Any clinical trial in any type of application may be selected to be inspected. A GCP inspector typically inspects trials in many different indication areas and with any type of medicinal products. National competent authorities supervise the clinical trials taking place in the EU to ensure that the well-being of trial participants is protected. The GCP inspections in context of a marketing authorization application are more focused on supporting the assessment, on verifying that the data used for the decision-making is reliable. It is also a requirement, of course, that the clinical trials used to support a marketing authorization application comply with ethical standards. So that is always an important aspect in the inspection. An EMA-coordinated inspection can take place in the EU or outside the EU. A trial in a marketing authorization application may have been conducted anywhere in the world, as long as it complies with equivalent rules to what we have in place in the EU. For me, working in a multi-EU national team and being able to see how the same trials are conducted in very different environments in different parts of the world is one of the most interesting parts of the inspector's work. In a GCP inspection, the entity inspected is a clinical trial. There are often many organizations and people involved in the clinical trial, and the ones ultimately responsible for the trial are always the sponsor and the investigator. You can go back to the previous slide still, thank you. But the inspection may be performed at any site that is relevant to the trial. Typically, a clinical research organization is inspected, but also, for example, an IT service provider or an analytical lab could be inspected. With the next slide, I will give you a high-level overview of some examples of what the inspection may cover. The investigator site is where the patients are and where the source data is. At the investigator site, the inspection starts with verifying that there are participants that have given their voluntary, informed consent to participate in the trial. Based on the documentation and by interviewing the staff involved in the trial, we assess the compliance to the protocol and the safety and efficacy data collection. At the investigator site, we also get an idea of the level of oversight of the trial by the sponsor. The sponsor inspection is the most complex due to the amount of activities that take place there. The sponsor is responsible for the design of the trial, overall management and oversight of the conduct of the trial, data analysis, and also most IT systems used in the trial. It's like the investigator side is the heart of the trial and the sponsor is the brain. One is crucial for the other one to function. An inspection of an analytical facility is typically performed in the context of a bioequivalence trial used to support a generic application. For these inspections, most member states have specialized inspectors who are experienced in analytical methodologies and pharmacokinetic analysis. And in all these inspections, it is important to understand what is critical to quality and to focus on that, as in the principles of GCP. The various different activities and organizations require different expertise, and training of a GCP inspector usually takes several years. A GCP inspector is typically a generalist. We know a little or a lot about a lot of things, but for some activities, we may consult an expert to prepare for the inspection or to work with us during the inspection. To have a strong network of inspectors with different areas of expertise, the EMA is working together with the national competent authorities in capacity building, for example, by supporting training opportunities. After the inspection, next slide, please. A report is produced that summarizes what was inspected and the relevant findings made. Each finding is classified based on the impact to participant safety or the data reliability. After the inspectee has been given an opportunity to respond to the findings, a final conclusion of the outcome of the inspection is made. and what happens then after an inspection. Next slide. If there have been findings that are critical to data quality or ethical trial conduct, the data may be rejected in a marketing authorization application. Where inspection findings need to be taken into consideration in the assessment of the application, the inspectors work together with the assessors and CHMP to resolve issues and facilitate the application process. In case of an ongoing trial, the national competent authority may ask to change some aspect of the trial, or there may be a reason to stop the trial from continuing. Although the purpose of the inspections is regulatory supervision, also learning both ways happen during the inspections. In every inspection, knowledge is shared with clinical investigators and sponsors on the expectations of regulators regarding compliance to GCP. And inspectors gain important learnings about the trial conduct in practice and the challenges that our stakeholders have out there in the real world. As an inspector, I hope that inspections help the investigators and sponsors to run successful trials and produce high-quality data, and to get on the market the medicines that the patients need. Next slide, please. I'm ending this presentation with a photo from the city of Kuopio, where the Fimea headquarters is located in the middle in the background. As the saying goes, all roads lead to a medicines agency, and in some member states also the ski tracks. I hope you found this interesting. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tina, so much for your personal view on this inspection part as well. And so we have seen key aspects of the assessment of medicines in the multinational assessment teams. Now, Francesca will share with us an overview of the opportunities for expert involvement in our core assessment and related activities. What is possible? Francesca, over to you.
Thank you very much, Carl, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Francesca Day, and I am the head of the Therapeutic Area Department here at the EMA. And today I'm going to talk to you about some of the more practical aspects and how you could potentially contribute to the EU regulatory system that you've just heard about. There are a couple of avenues in which you could get involved. So if I could have the first slide, please. So one of the options is for external experts to be engaged directly by the national competent authorities, the NCAs. In this way, experts can be used for assessments or inspections or any other activities that are carried out at the NCA level. Assessment includes scientific advice, marketing authorization applications, clinical trial applications, and any other type of assessment that our agencies or NCAs carry out throughout the life cycle of a medicine. Through this avenue, it would be the NCA that selects, contracts, and pays the experts. They would manage any conflict of interest as well for those particular experts. The remuneration in these cases would be commensurate with the amount of work required, and it would be negotiated directly with the NCA and the expert, and it would be subject to national rules. So it's likely to be different in different NCAs as well. Through this avenue, training for experts would be provided by the contracting NCA, who also may decide to use experts not necessarily for assessment or inspections, but maybe other complementary activities such as training or information gathering, etc. One thing that might happen, of course, is that through these interactions, the NCAs may eventually even choose to employ experts as staff members. So this would be entirely down to the NCA and the expert, of course. So that's one particular avenue that we have. The next avenue, which is on the next slide, is where we involve EMA. EMA directly involves experts in supportive activities. So this is direct EMA contracting of experts. In this case, it's EMA that engages these external experts following a call for expression of interest. We would then select, contract, and pay these experts directly from the EMA, and it would be the EMA then to manage any conflict of interests for these experts. Generally, the remuneration is set in the call for expression of interest upfront, so it's clear already what the remuneration would be for the activities that are advertised in that call. At the moment, we have a couple of calls for interest for medical device experts and also for patient and healthcare professional representatives. And these are calls for specific tasks, and you can find those on our website. But we may consider in the future additional calls, and for example, using experts for training and for other activities that we manage directly here in the EMA. But of course, anything that would be advertised in any of the EMA calls of interest would not include core assessment work or inspection work, because as was mentioned, that is all carried out directly by the NCAs. But of course, there's an option really to engage external experts for any additional tasks that sort of complement that assessment work at the national level. Next slide, please. One thing that we need to be absolutely clear about up front, and that applies really whether you would be contracted by the NCA or by the EMA, is that we really have this mandate to ensure the independence of our work. It's very important that we manage conflict of interest, and I will explain that in a little bit more detail in the next slide. But we have scientific experts, staff and management members that must not have any financial or any other interest that could affect impartiality. And this also applies to any experts that we engage with. We also, as I think both Anna and Tina very nicely showed, you wouldn't be alone in the system. There's a very well-established peer review mechanism for all of the assessments that are carried out. We have rapporteur and co-rapporteur. There are always committee discussions and peer review. So any expert that would be engaged would be in the mechanism and wouldn't definitely be left on their own, so to say. And it's also important that we stress how transparency is paramount. We publish all of our assessment reports, the agendas and the minutes for our committee meetings, and we really allow public scrutiny of how the EMA works and how we reach our decisions on products. And this, of course, would be clear, obviously, to any experts that anything that they would prepare would also be transparently published where it's important to do so. Next slide, please. So I mentioned conflict of interests and how it's very important that anybody that engages with the EMA and with the network is free from conflicts of interest. And here we have a few details, really high level. There is a specific policy on our website that you can refer to, Policy 44, if you really want to look at all of the specific details for handling the competing interests. But really fundamentally, nobody that works for us or in the network must have any current employment or consultancy or advisory role or financial interest in a pharmaceutical or medical device company. And this also includes consultancy companies and CROs. We also have some restrictions depending on the activities for involvement as investigators or principal investigators in clinical studies, and also for interests that belong to close family members. So that's also something to potentially consider. And we also have restrictions for some activities in research organizations. So as I mentioned, it's quite a detailed policy that we have. If you have any concerns, then you can definitely refer to Policy 44. But in broad strokes, really, any employment by a company, a pharmaceutical or devices company, activities as investigator on a case-by-case are really things that we should be concerned about before you apply. As mentioned here, we will essentially contact you for a specific activity, and at that point, it's where we will really ask for a declaration of interest, and the conflict of interest of the expert will be assessed at that point. We will not do an assessment at the entry of the call for interest. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to do here today with this webinar? Essentially, we're trying to build a pool of interested external experts. What we will do following this webinar is we will send out a survey to anybody that registered, where we can see that you still have an interest in potentially becoming involved. And we will ask you a few questions around your area of expertise, etc. So it won't be a long survey. We're mindful of people's time, but we will collect a few pieces of information just to build this sort of pool of experts. Participation in the survey is, of course, voluntary, but if you don't respond, then we won't have your details, and then it will be much harder then to become involved with our activities. So once we've built this pool of external experts, it will be essentially a database, if you like, available for national competent authorities and also for us in the EMA to engage with experts as and when needed in a given area of expertise. So it will be a useful resource for us when we're looking to reach out on various activities to specific experts. What we will do also is when we are aware of any updates or opportunities, or if we have published a call for interest, etc., we will also share these updates with the people that have registered through the survey, so that you will receive this information firsthand as well. And we may also potentially offer some training, some generic training to the members of the pool, so the people that have expressed an interest. For example, on the EU regulatory aspects, this to give you a little bit more detail, let's say, on some of the things that you heard about today, and really prepare you maybe a little bit better for use, getting involved in certain activities. But any specific training, any much more detailed training will happen if and when you become engaged either by a national competent authority or by the EMA. And next slide, please. So that concludes my part of the presentation, and I hand back to Carl.
Thank you, Francesca, for explaining the different opportunities of expert involvement in our European system. As we approach now the end of this webinar, and before I pass back to my co-chair Emer to conclude the session, allow me to thank all speakers once again for providing the information and sharing their personal involvement and experience as well. I hope with this set of presentations you have heard how we work, and we have captivated further your interest in our activities and provided you with additional information on the possibilities to become further involved. As already highlighted by Francesca and explained in the chat as well, following this webinar, you will receive a survey from us where you will also have the opportunity to confirm your interest to participate in our network activities and provide more information about yourself. With your agreement, this information then will be shared with the national competent authorities who may reach out to you in case they seek experts in your area of expertise. We will also keep the registered experts informed about any new opportunities for external expert involvement. So please follow up with us, and we are looking forward to further exchange with you to be part of our multinational teams. Emer, it's now my pleasure to hand over to you to wrap up, and back to you, Emer.
Thank you very much, Carl, and a big thank you also to all the speakers today. I hope you got a good flavour of how the European system works and what the opportunities are, and a big thank you to everybody involved. Thank you, Carl, for chairing, and thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today. Finally, I would like to echo Carl's words. It's indeed our hope that this webinar, which will be recorded, will help you consider getting further engaged with the activities that we undertake. And if not yourselves, that maybe you can help us to amplify these opportunities among your peers. So a big thank you for joining us, and have a good rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you very much.